Hi, this is Paul, and I just watched the CBC interview that Jonathan Bajeau tweeted about, and where Jordan Peterson talks about the Pepe interview. And I actually thought it was quite a good interview on both sides. The point of a good journalist is to be adversarial. That's part of the game, because you want to push on someone, but you want to do it fairly, and you want to do it in a way that allows the other person to not only present their points clearly, but allows them to defend some of their points against adversaries who see it in a different light. So actually, I thought the interview with, this is CBC, so I don't watch CBC because I'm south of the border. Um, with Wendy Mesley, I know nothing about her, but I thought the interview was really quite good, and she gave Jordan Peterson a chance to talk about the Keck and Pepe, and what I appreciated about Peterson was that he made the point that, hey, look, to engage with people and to talk with people is not to accept what people believe. And for myself as a pastor, this is this is what we do all the time. We as I should be talking to people who believe differently from myself. If I'm only talking to church people or Christian people, then I'm not doing my job. In the Christian Reformed vows of ordination, in that form, part of what specifically we're being charged with is to do the work of an evangelist. And I know that sounds like proselytizing, but in terms of the Protestant tradition, that means that we speak the gospel to Christians and non-Christians alike, and we bear witness to the gospel through blessing our enemies. I mean, it was Jesus that said, "Love your enemies, pray for those who persecute you." This is from our master, and so this is part of what we do. And so when Peterson is talking about trying to call out young men, part of what this makes me a frustration that I have had for a long time with the right, because it seems the culture flipped, not too long ago, where the right was self-righteous and judgmental, and was always on its moral high horse, and that seems to have flipped now, and the left is self-righteous and judgmental and on their high horse. And what I want to say to my friends on the left is denounce the only thing you've got, because if all you can do is sit there and denounce people who believe differently than yourself, denounce people that you believe are wrong, denounce people that you believe are evil. If that's all you have, if you don't sit down and talk with them, if you can't agree with them on what you have in common, how on earth are you going to make progress in bridging the gaps and healing the divides that rip society apart? And so that's a common thing. If denounce is the only thing you've got, then then the slide into a tyrannical or totalitarian system is what you've got, because all you can finally do with your adversary is denounce them as evil and declare that they should be ostracized and marginalized, and no one should speak to them. And again, part of what I appreciate about Peterson is that he will talk to people across the ideological divide, and you'll sit down with someone and talk to them as a human being, and have the guts to not simply use a conversation in order to score ideological points. And I think, back to the pastor lying comment, I think this is at the heart of what Peterson means by lying, to use speech, basically to weaponize speech and use it as a way to increase your tribe at the expense of your adversary's tribe. And now, on one hand, that's a legitimate game we play, and we should play that game. But on the other hand, it should be nested within a larger game. And this is, I think, the source of humanism, and the source which I think is founded, I think it's dependent on the imago Dei, the image of God that we find in Genesis 1, that finally, as in the words of Ephesians 6, we don't wrestle against flesh and blood, but principalities and powers. And one way to understand that is, again, in the ancient world, you're thinking about spiritual forces, and I like Jordan Peterson. I'm not going to say that isn't true, but for those culturally for whom that is a bridge too far, I would say that the things that dominate, the immaterial things that dominate us, say our culture, our traditions, our history, our past, these things play. And so in Ephesians 6, when we talk about when the Apostle Paul talks to, through his letter, he's saying, we don't battle with flesh and blood, but against principalities and powers. And what that means is that when we engage an adversary, first of all, let's do it verbally. Let's by all means talk as long as we possibly can before any kind of violence is resorted to. And let's do so always bearing in mind that the other person sitting across the table is, again, I'm a Christian, an image bearer of God. And the heart of the Christian story is that humanity victimizes its creator, and the creator lets us get away with it. And does so, in fact, in the Christian story, the script gets flipped, and this heinous crime becomes the means by which people are transformed. You see, I got sidetracked, and I think so. If denounce is all you've got, you really don't have enough in terms of dealing with human beings. And this gets into what Peterson talks again and again about ideology as a broken religion or a broken worldview. It's simply insufficient. And if you haven't read this, I would greatly recommend this particular article that came out in spring 2017. There's the URL right up at the top on the Hedgehog Review, and if you're disposed to listening to things, just click on it. But basically, what this article asserts is that culturally we have gotten ourselves into a corner, and the irony, I actually first saw this because it was mentioned in a David Brooks column, and once I read it, I thought this is one of the best things I read in 2017. Those who are living in the developed countries of the West find themselves in a tightening grip of a paradox, one whose shape and character have so far eluded our understanding. It is the strange persistence of guilt as a psychological force in modern life. If anything, the word persistent understates the matter. Guilt is not merely lingering, it has grown, even metastasized, into an ever more powerful and pervasive element in the life of the contemporary West. And he goes on to talk about Nietzsche. I'm trying to say that word for someone's gentle German ears that made a comment. I use the word strange persistent to suggest that the modern drama of guilt is not following the script that was written for it. Prophets such as Friedrich Nietzsche were confident that once the modern Western world finally threw off the metaphysical straitjacket that had confined the possibilities of all previous generations, the moral reflexes that had accompanied that framework would disappear with them. And this I think is, when Peterson talks about Nietzsche, this is exactly the position where he takes a different turn from, as I mentioned in an earlier video, where he takes a different turn from Brett Weinstein or from Sam Harris, because, and this is kind of the assumption of the left, that once we're free of religion, then, well, as Peterson notes, then we'll think rationally. Well, that's hardly true. And once we're free of religion, we'll be free of guilt. And he says, no, that's not what the evidence is suggesting. With God dead, all would indeed be permitted. Chief among the outmoded reflexes would be the experience of guilt, an obvious vestige of irrational fear promulgated by oppressive, life-denying institutions erected in the name of image of a punitive deity. Indeed, Nietzsche had argued on the genealogy of morality, 1887, a locus classicus for the modern understanding of guilt, that the very idea of God or the gods originated hand in hand with the feeling of indebtedness. The belief in God or gods rose in primitive societies, Nietzsche speculated, out of the dread of ancestors and feeling of indebtedness to them. This feeling of indebtedness expanded its hold in tandem with the expansion of the concept of God, to the point that when the Christian God offered itself as the maximal God yet achieved, it also brought about the greatest feelings of indebtedness on earth. But we now have started in the reverse direction, Nietzsche exulted, with the death of God, meaning God's general cultural unavailability. We would expect to see a consequent decline in the consciousness of human debt. With the cultural triumph of atheism at hand, such a victory would release humanity from this whole feeling of being indebted towards the beginning. It's prima causa. Sorry, my Spanish is creeping through. Atheism would mean a second innocence, regaining from Eden, with neither God nor Satan there to interfere with the otherwise corrupt generation. And he goes on to, then jumps to Freud, but then he goes on to the point that what we actually have, and this has been, I think, embodied by the ascendant morality of the far left. See, if we're going to use far right, maybe we'll use far left. The ascendant morality of the far left that now shows all of us are indebted. And now this now gets into, the history of Protestantism and Christianity and even Calvinism. And I'm a Calvinist. But why then are secular people driven by, guilt? And guilt stalks everyone. And I think in some ways, the Peterson experience has been a reaction to this. And, let's not feel guilty. Let's get in touch with our responsibility and let's take action. And so, if you're looking for something to read that is absolutely vital and I thought trenchant, The Strange Persistence of Guilt on the Hedgehog Review, and the Earl's right up there at top, is definitely one to catch. Another thing, there's just been a torrent of stuff out on Peterson. His book tour has been, I'm sure for the publishers, just a smashing success, and a success for him. Jesus Creed is Scott McKnight's blog. He has other people write on it, and Patrick Mitchell here wrote on Peterson, and and he had a good list of a lot of good things to say. There's the Earl at the top, and I'll put it in the notes too. Peterson is at his most Calvinist when it comes to human nature, in contrast with a naive optimism that we are all essentially rational and good and just need to be given extra opportunity in life for justice to flourish. Peterson, the psychologist, tells us that we are a mess of competing desires, irrational decisions, and damaging behavior. We need to understand this truth about ourselves. We are all capable of being monsters. And I thought that, sometimes like, well, why would a Calvinist would like Peterson? Well, in terms of the theological anthropology, we're brothers in this. And then the debate. The interview went into what's next, and that idea has been possessing me for a while, because with this European book tour and with the Kathy Newman interview, which once again worked out spectacularly in Peterson's favor, and with good write-ups from Connor, I can't say Connor's last name, in the Atlantic, that treated that, and David Brooks, some of the best journalists in the business have written good, honest, challenging pieces on Peterson that came out over the last week, and so Peterson in many ways is right now under the the right has talked about mainstream media, and I can't hear those words without listening to Sarah Palin say them, but or Tina Fey saying them like Sarah Palin, but the eye of the media is like the eye of Sauron, and it's shining its gaze on Peterson right now, but that gaze is going to go away, and most people who watch the Peterson stuff are going to say, oh, what about this guy? And he's going to have their attention for about 15 minutes, and then it's going to go away. Now, he might pop up again, and who knows? We don't know what's going to happen. But so I've been, doing a lot of thinking about what's next. And I really appreciated his answers on this, because he says, I don't know what's next. He didn't plan this on happening, and he's taking it one step at a time. But working as a pastor has taught me a lot about transformation and narratives in people's lives. And one of the things, if you listen to my sermon, you'll hear this phrase pop up, and people say, well, where do you get this phrase, the age of decay? Well, I say I get it from Romans 8, because the Bible talks about two ages. There's the present age. Sometimes it's called the present evil age, but in this age, everything decays. And Jordan Peterson can have his spotlight moment, but as he said in the interview, a crash is coming. And this is, well, how can you say this? Well, because he's a human being. And if you pay any attention to human beings, we all fall. And so he's speaking very carefully, and he's trying to do things exactly right, so at least his fall won't be self-inflicted. And again, this is a very Calvinist perspective. And, there's an old Calvinist joke about the Calvinist who fell down the stairs and, gets up and brushes himself off and says, at least that's over with, because, we're supposed to have all these ideas of determinism and predestination. But one of the things that you realize as a pastor is that there's no arriving. In other words, and you see this at the end of The Truman Show, which is a really fun movie where, everybody's just glued to the TV watching Truman, and then he checks out, he walks out of his world, and then everybody watching who's just fixed upon it changes the channel. Okay, what's next? And that moment says everything about our generation. It says everything about, okay, so you're a Jordan Peterson fan, and now he's getting written up by David Brooks, and he's in the Atlantic, and mainstream pieces are going to see that, and you're just thinking, well, will he go to another level? Will he be on ABC News? Will he get interviewed on the Sunday morning talk shows? And Peterson is dead on right, and his talk about lobsters and hierarchy. There's all of these hierarchies, and his status has climbed, and the news organs are very sensitive to issues of status because they're motivated by the market. And so if there's greater status, let me just make another point offhand, that every time someone says, he's getting $65,000 a month, I think, well, you sitting across the table asking him questions, how much money do you make? These are people making serious amounts of money who are challenging him for making money. So, we don't ask this of NBA players. Well, how dare you sign a contract for $20 million because you're the best basketball player in the world? Well, there's a question behind that. But, why is, Peterson, or, people are sending Peterson money voluntarily. And you're going to criticize this? So, if you don't think it's worth it, don't give him a dime. That's fine. But anyway, so there's no arriving here. And I see that in church work all the time, that, what will happen with a religious conversion is usually it goes like this. Something goes terribly wrong in someone's life, and they go into the realm of chaos. And then they're looking for order in chaos. And so maybe they find Jordan Peterson, or maybe they bump into a pastor, or, what often occasions someone's first visit to church was they had a fight with their wife, or their marriage ended, or their parent died. And they come into church all hot and bothered, and they sit in the pew, and gosh, wouldn't you know it, that one Sunday I preached the best sermon I've ever preached. And they're sitting there in tears. And after the service, they come up to me and they say, Pastor, I'm going to join your church. I'm going to be there every week. And every time I hear someone say that, I just smile. And, oh, wonderful. And I hope you are, and I hope you will be. But 90% of the people that come in and say that, I never see them again. The people who come in and they just kind of listen, and they think, and they ponder, well, they're the ones that they might come back next week. But the ones who come in with these huge declarations of what they're going to do, most of the time they don't. But let's imagine that, okay, so they've had this religious conversion, and they've found this church that they love, and they've discovered all these wonderful people around them, and and then their next challenge is going to be, well, can you do this every day? In fact, again, what's so good about a lot of what Peterson notes is that, he's talking about shopkeeper virtues. And actually, if you read Adam Smith and Wealth of the Nations, he talks a lot about similar things. But he's talking about shopkeeper virtues, and I'm struck in the book of First Timothy when the Apostle Paul is writing to Timothy and he's telling him, the kinds of leaders he should have in the church. The leaders are often people who are faithful to their spouses and they go to work every day, and they're reliable people. And when it comes to churches are built by reliable people who come every week when the sermon's good and the sermon's bad, who give and support the church financially, who can be trusted on to show up, who, if there's a potluck, they bring a dish. These are all the virtues that actually, if you were raised in a Christian home, you were brought into, and there's duty in there and there's responsibility in there. But it's sometimes it feels tyrannical, but most of the time it's training a child in the way they should go, and bringing them up to not be flighty or not be inconsistent, but to speak the truth and be true to their word and follow through. And so this is why I use PowerPoint. I always get off. But even so, let's imagine someone does all of these things and they start going to church, and they come every week, and they tithe, and they volunteer, and they become an officer in the church, and they do everything right. And sometimes people will give themselves to this, and then they'll do it for 10 years, and they'll stop and they say, I thought this was supposed to make a difference. And I'll say, yeah, it made a big difference. But it didn't change the world. And I think that's what we're going to see in this this bright shining moment of Peterson, in the glare of the media eye, that this is wonderful, and his book came out, but people will look around and they'll say, but elections weren't overturned. And there's this one moment in the Gospels where Jesus is in Nazareth. There's two moments in the Gospels when crowds want to take hold of Jesus. When he's in the Galilee, at one point they want to make him king, at another point they want to kill him, and that's exactly the way this goes, because you reach out and you hear someone who seems to have all the answers, and you fall in love with that moment, and you grab them and you say, oh, I want this person to rule the world, and I want this person to change my life. Well, that experience is very much similar to falling in love, but what you begin to realize after you fall in love is that, especially after you get married, is that this other person that you've married is complicated, and you are looking at them through the eyes of infatuation, and you had projected yourself on them, and they were mirroring you, and now after the honeymoon, and a good bit after the honeymoon, you begin to realize that they are a chimp filled with snakes, and now you get into the basic work of putting your life together, of getting up on time and going to a job that there's a reason they pay you to go there, because you wouldn't want to go there normally, and dealing with people that you can't stand, and even getting to the point of loving your enemy. In other words, all of the programs you can do as self-authoring program, and that might change your life, but will it change the world? Will Peterson's book change the world? We do this in the age of decay, and all of our works fail. And this is and sometimes people, when they get to the church, they say, but this is the church. This is supposed to be about God. And the archetypal nature of God talk cuts both ways, because on one hand it may inspire you, but in this age, it will always disappoint you. And this actually sets up C.S. Lewis in Mere Christianity in his argument from desire, which says, why do we have these feelings if these feelings are not going to be satisfied? In fact, we should dare to believe that they will. And so as I've been thinking about Peterson, this old adage, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And this is, in fact, sometimes people ask me, well, why go to church? I'm a Calvinist. I'm fallen. I'm broken. I'm flighty. I don't follow through. I lie. I'm the worst kind of person. In fact, the Apostle Paul calls himself the chief of sinners. I'm the worst kind of person. Well, why go to church? Because if I go to church and I make it a discipline, and I come here every week, and now if I'm not preaching, then I got to come and I got to listen to a sermon. And I'll tell you, every preacher will tell you, not every sermon's great. Sometimes you go up there and you lay an egg, and so, but it's this discipline of meeting together, of worship, and in videos to come I'm going to talk about worship, because in a secular context, worship is one of the most radical things we do, especially if you're deeply embedded and have a buffered self in a secular culture, because to stand up there and praise someone who isn't in the room seems nuts. And the idea that you use with your imagination that this other person who is God is enjoying your worship, well, this just seems certifiable if you haven't grown up in it, or if you don't believe it, and I get that, but what does church do for me? Well, church is accountability. Church keeps me focused. Part of the big problem that we see at the end of the Truman Show is, okay, I'm watching Jordan Peterson now. I'm so excited about him, and I think Jordan Peterson's making all of this sense. Okay, 6 months from now, who's it going to be? Is it going to be Jonathan Haidt, or is it going to be Sam Harris, or is it going to be Tim Keller, or is it going to be the favorite book that you read, and so on and so on and so on? It's in terms of the care of your mind, the same problem that promiscuity is in terms of the care of your genitals. And so if you actually want to have one life narrative where you're building and actually developing and growing and making progress, and becoming, well, progress always implies a destination. Progress in terms of, now again, I'm speaking out of my Christian values, in terms of being the kind of person that can love enemies, the kind of person that can sit down and talk with adversaries. And in Jesus' day, this was why he ate with prostitutes and tax collectors, because for the Pharisaical tribe, which in some ways religiously was the closest tribe to him, these were all the people that it was an object of religion that they would avoid and therefore hate. And this is why Jesus didn't attack the Romans when everyone says, you should denounce them. And this is in fact a microcosm of the larger mission that the Christian story says Jesus came to accomplish, because we were all his enemies. And he came for his enemies, not just to talk with us, not just to share his wisdom with us, not just to give instructions to us, but to die on our behalf, to become himself a sacrifice for us. And so, Peterson's having his moment now, but at some point, the attention has to be on building institutions, because, as I've said before, that a lot of you have picked up, without the individual, nothing changes. But without institutions, nothing lasts. So, one of the things that we did last week, and some of you asked for a report, is we did a meetup, and I started a meetup group in Sacramento. And so we had a few intrepid individuals who came out to Living Stones on a Thursday night, and we had pizza, and we watched some Jordan Peterson videos, and we talked about it, and we had a great time. And now some of us are going to San Francisco to see him in his book tour, and I'll be going there, and I think I'm not expecting to hear anything new on the book tour, and I'm worried about Peterson. He talked so much. I'm like, dude, pace yourself, man. Take care of yourself. We don't want you burning out and getting sick, because you're in the middle of chaos, baby, and it's rough on the body. So yeah, I'm going to San Francisco, and part of the reason I'm going is that, I just want, I don't know that I'll hear anything different from Peterson that he hasn't said 1,000 times in his video. I want to get a sense of the other people around. That's what's been fun about this project. It's the new people that I've met, and I'm showing my openness and my extroversion, but it's the new people I've met, and it's the new relationships I've been able to build, and this has been just tremendously fun. And so I think, I think people should start up Jordan Peterson meetup groups. And actually, I've got to give credit to John Van Donk, who, John is a friend of mine from another online community called CRC Voices. And so I've known John not very long, actually, but once I did my video, and then I had all these people watching it, and then John Van Donk says, you should start a meetup group. And I'm like, what? he says, you should start a meetup group. And I said, okay. So I did that. And John's trying to start one in the Inland Empire and in Southern California. And, he doesn't have the advantage I have because he's not making videos. Maybe, John, you should. He'll say he shouldn't. John's a wonderful guy. But he's, so then I told him, I said, well, have a meeting before the event at the Orpheum. And that's just it. Because, and this is, I know people, when they look at the church, they see an institution and they think, I don't like organized religion. Well, let me tell you something. If you don't organize yourself, and really what an institution is designed to facilitate is the organism. And in church talk, we talk about the institution, which is, the thing that has budgets and pays for this building and puts on the electricity and gives us a place to meet. You have the institution, but you have the organism. And what the organism is the people. And the people are the chimps filled with snakes. And so it's a matter of, the Bible says, do not give up the habit of meeting regularly. This book of Hebrews says this, as some are in the habit of doing. And so, in other words, we meet together and we see each other and we have problems together. And as a pastor of a church, I'll tell you, people get sideways with one another and they get into conflicts. And sometimes the conflicts are over the most petty things you can imagine. And sometimes as a pastor, I just want to shake people or slap people and say, well, why don't you cut it out and act your age? But it's this playing field in the church that we actually begin to work on each other. And this is, the early video I did in terms of my advice. It's the playing field in the church that we begin to work on each other and we talk to one another and we discover the glory in each other and we discover the catastrophe in each other and we discover the pettiness in each other and we discover the generosity in each other. But we can only do that with other human beings. And so, if you're if you really want to further the cause, the status business, you might celebrate the fact that Jordan Peterson's status goes up and up because more and more people are going to listen to him, but that also means you're going to have less and less access to him. And that's exactly the way hierarchies work. And so the best way to deal with that is, in fact, to find other people to get together with. And what you will find is that while Jordan Peterson is a wonderful guy and he's gifted and he can do lots of things and he's blessing us with all kinds of information and all kinds of good stuff, that this world is full of really interesting people who have their own perspectives and their own brilliance and their own stories. And yeah, you can listen to, stuff from Jordan Peterson, but you can learn stuff in a meetup group. And yeah, there'll be some people that annoy you and some people you don't really have chemistry with, but there'll be other people that you find that you do have chemistry with. And this is in fact how the world moves forward. And this is in fact how these crippled, low resolution things that are ideologies that says, well, we want to judge people because they're black or because they're white. And we begin to realize that people are these amazing complex creatures that sometimes will bore you out of your mind. As a pastor, I can tell you, people can be really boring, but other times can fascinate you and say things that you won't believe. And it's not just smart people. Smart people can be a pain in the butt. Sometimes it's people with low IQs that can sometimes say things that are just so brilliant. You ponder and say, how did you see that? You can't even tie your shoes well. And this is the mystery of people. And so if you want to take a lot of this good stuff and turn it into a movement, well, bucko, take some responsibility. Get online, pay the $10, start a meetup, get some people together, pay another $40 for pizza, put up a computer, watch some videos, talk, meet. And then when you start a group, come do it not just once, but twice or three times. Give it a good effort. And this is, when people, this is all the stuff I do as a pastor, because in many ways church works in a similar way. And sometimes people will come to me and they'll say, I had a fight at my church. And I'd say, well, okay, let's see what you can do to straighten out that fight. Or, it's the same when someone comes to me, they had a fight with their spouse. See what you can do to straighten out that spouse. Or not to straighten out your spouse, because you can't straighten them out, straighten out yourself. So, start a meetup and see where this goes. And like, I think Peterson said in this interview, your fantasies are, he didn't really say this in the interview, but your fantasies are all wrong about what will happen. You never know what's going to happen in the future. So as a pastor, I should wrap this up. I didn't want this to be too long. As a pastor, I'm going to be praying for Jordan Peterson. And I know for some of you atheists and agnostics, just think of that as well-wishing, and however you want to translate it into your more secular culture. That's fine with me. But he has blessed me, and so one way I can bless him is to pray for him and pray for his family and pray that the Lord protect him and pray that the Lord give him wisdom. And here's the crazy thing that I've learned as a pastor, that so often, even when we stumble, God can do amazing things with it. And so after the Kathy Newman interview, he might have imagined that maybe this was terrible, and then in the aftermath, when there's all this victim playing, maybe this is a catastrophe. But I look at that chapter and say, look at all the good stuff that came out of it. Now maybe some bad stuff will come out of it too. I mean, life is just like that. And so as a Christian, we pray, and when we pray, we obviously ask for what we want. If you want to read a good book on prayer, read C.S. Lewis's Letters to Malcolm, a terrific book. But when we pray, we in a sense, we enter into conversation with that which is beyond us. So we put it in Petersonian language, and we are making a sacrifice, and we're putting it on the altar. And when we're praying, we're engaging the future. And we're having a conversation with our future, if we use that Jungian language. And so, I know others in a part of a couple of Facebook groups, Christian Jordan Peterson Facebook groups, and I know a number of other people were saying how they pray for Peterson, and so that's good. And I think and I think for me, again, part of the reason I am the kind of Christian I am, the reason that I'm part of what Tim Keller often calls a crunchy denomination, and why I like a crunchy Christianity, is because that's what I mean by that is a Christianity that says the church is always, in a sense, a half measure in the age of decay, and all of the saints you meet are always saints in progress, and all of the heroes you have clay feet. They will stumble and fall. And Peterson will too, and he talks about this in this interview. He says, he's going to fail at some point, and he will. Well, why don't people talk like that? Well, it's because we're all liars, and we don't want to say that, but it's true. He will stumble and fall, and he will make a misstep, and the lying comes when you're always trying to justify it instead of saying, well, maybe I shouldn't have done that. Maybe I shouldn't have said that. The truth is, we never know. And so part of why I'm a crunchy Christian in this sense is I believe in the resurrection. And I believe, as Dostoevsky puts some of the best speeches in his adversaries and his theological adversaries' mouths, that, I believe, think about Ivan's speech in the Brothers Karamazov. I can't quote it. I just should devote it to memory. But, I'm a crunchy Christian. I believe in the resurrection. And I believe that God is the only one who can judge. And in the end, I think at the end of this age, all things will be settled. Things will be settled rightly. And as the age to come dawns, and with Christians, there's the present evil age and there's the age to come, but they overlap. And what the Bible says is that we're in that overlap right now, where we taste the age to come and we taste the present evil age, and they're both here. And the church is supposed to be, the church is embedded in the present evil age. It's embedded in the age of decay, and it always stumbles and it always fails, and it never quite reaches our expectation. But God has invaded in the resurrection, and the new age is dawning. And so in the church, with people, with all sorts of people, we begin to see glimmers of the age to come. And if you want, I think one of the best books I've read on the age to come is C.S. Lewis's The Last Battle in his Narnia series, where it's further up and further in. So I'm going to have more to say about C.S. Lewis. I wanted to do a short video, but I have a hard time doing a short video, so I ramble. But I hope this was helpful to you. And watch the Peterson interview on CBC. I'll put the link here. And yeah, enjoy. I thought it was really good.